So before we get started, does anybody have any questions about any of the homework? So reflection 2 is due tonight. For next time, so are the vocab words for the Douglas reading. Like I said, if you've already got 10 points, you don't have to do them anymore. For next time, you are reading Shakespeare's Sister by Virginia Woolf. I think it's the next essay after Douglas. What's that? Yeah. So just keep going. Oh, and it's actually 29 to 34 and not 36 because I can't count.
29 to what?
29 to 34. Okay. So the last couple of essays that we've been talking about have dealt primarily with issues of justice, ethics, and right and wrong, right? So I think the things that we're going to be talking about over the next week and a half will continue with those particular themes, but will be more directly concerned with themes of education, literacy, and the way these things intersect with notions of identity. Right? So, oh, you all right?
Yeah. That was weird. Proceed.
All right. And we've already got some experience with this, with pieces like Audre Lorde's, right? But yeah, this is going to be our main focus for the next week and a half or so. And so I'd like to start by trying to pick apart and analyze a little bit the way we tend to think about education in North America in particular. So I want to look at a couple of samples before we start digging into the Douglas and looking at how Douglas's values when it comes to education might be a little bit different from broader contemporary North American social values, right? So can we turn to page 515 in Reading the World? You've got 4 ads on that page for a Canadian institution called Centennial College. And what I would like you to do is just sit and look at these ads for a couple of minutes and tell me what you notice about them. Right? Just make a couple of quick observations. take another minute or two with these. See what you can get out of them. Okay, so you guys are all first years, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I imagine you are at an age where you are probably intimately familiar with the genre known as the college brochure, right? I imagine you've probably seen a lot of these things.
Yes.
Okay, so what sorts of expectations do you have in an advertisement for a college, right? What sorts of things do you expect to see?
Kids studying.
Okay.
Library or something.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, you expect to see things like students studying. Good, what else?
Landscape pictures of what the college.
Yeah, pictures of the campus, right? Especially anything that emphasizes, trees or attractive buildings, right? You'll notice this building doesn't appear much on campus brochures here, right?
I'm pretty sure Kane Central is gonna be like the #1 since it's the newest building.
Yeah, and I seriously want to know who names these stupid buildings. Kane Central, or the Student Success Center, the Academic Success Center. For a while, like everything that we were, like everything we built, we were just putting success in it,
We gotta be successful.
Yeah. But what is success really? And I actually mean that as a serious question, but not one for us to talk about right now. What else do you expect from like a campus advertisement, a campus
Pictures
brochure?
of like students hanging out
Okay.
on the bench,
Oh, yeah.
laughing.
All
they
smiling,
laughing.
no tears.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
No, everyone just looks real happy.
Uh-huh. And it's
In the
got
reality world.
and it's gotta be a diverse group of students
Oh, yeah.
usually too,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Like one of each ethnicity.
Yes.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I remember there being a scandal maybe 18 or 19 years ago. There was a university somewhere in the Midwest, I think it was in Iowa. They had photoshopped a black guy into a picture to try to make their campus look more diverse. And he was somebody who had been a student there, but he transferred after his freshman year. But yeah, they photoshopped him into a picture to make it look like he was hanging out with everybody else. To make their campus look like it wasn't quite so lily white. But we expect to see these kind of diverse student populations just hanging out together, getting along, having a great time, right?
Yeah.
What about in terms of like information? What sorts of things do you expect to see in a campus brochure?
Like the different majors and minors.
Yeah,
Like,
okay.
There's not like a lot of detail. It's just like.
This is what we offer. Yeah.
Or like if they're like GSW, nursing and education are the top majors.
Uh-huh.
So they probably mention that in more of a, we're the top tier or whatever, so.
Uh-huh. Yeah, they might also mention, certain awards or citations that certain academic programs have received. Yeah, good.
Is there graduation rate? And is the competition rate like what people say?
Yep, graduation and retention rates often fudged.
Athletics.
Athletics, yep.
Probably the sororities and fraternities too.
That might depend on that kind of depends on the institution though, right? There are some places where the fraternities and the sororities are a problem, and they want to downplay that, right? Plus, Greek life is often a kind of it's often a kind of independent thing, right? The university has relatively little control over. But yeah, but you'd like extracurricular activities certainly, right?
Oh, yeah.
Clubs.
Yeah. Extracurriculars, information on athletics, right? Pictures of the sports mascot all over the damn place, right? I remember a past student once saying that she thought that Surge looked like undead celery. So let's compare this to what's in these Centennial College ads, right? Let's start with what we expected and what we don't see in these ads. What's missing from these ads?
All of that.
Basically all of this, yes. Good, okay. Is there any information about the college at all?
No. It's talking more
Name
about
of it.
Einstein.
Yeah. There's no information about the college or about its academic programs. What do we have instead?
Kids.
The reality.
Okay. What do we mean by the reality? So you said the kids.
Yeah, just like, I mean, you got kids sleeping, homegirl
Yeah.
eating out of a can.
Yep.
Football.
Yeah. So we've got students, right? Or people who are ostensibly students or potential students, but they're not in academic situations, right? They seem to be instead in what the college or the advertisers regard as real life situations. Right? You've got one guy just kind of sitting shirtless on a couch with his girlfriend. You got another guy here who's she's slightly out of frame. You got another guy sitting fiddling with his phone. You've got, the girl you mentioned, like eating cold spaghetti out of a can, just shoveling it into her mouth.
That is a nasty.
Yeah, none of these pictures are flattering, right? None of these are like framed in a way that makes the person look particularly good. Why might that be? Why do you think they do that?
I think they're trying to encourage students that they can succeed despite the social standard of what a college student should look like.
Okay.
Like, I feel like college students immediately think, oh, there's this standard I have to meet. I'm a college kid now, I have to go and live on my own and not have my parents help and be responsible and study and put in all this work, but in reality, none of us have any idea what we're doing the second we get here.
Well, and the fact of the matter is, like, that's not going to change when you get out of here
Exactly.
either, right? I mean, that's the dirty little secret about adulthood is that all of us are just muddling through doing the best we can. Right? there is no point at which the penny suddenly drops and you get it. Yes. But like it's scary when you first realize that, but it's actually kind of liberating after a little while. When you realize, like, no, like things don't have to be perfect, right? Things don't have to follow this straight line that I had plotted for myself since I was 6, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, there's no notion here of college as being in any way kind of like aspirational, right? In fact, is there any suggestion here that college will change you in any significant way?
In here or in general?
In the ad.
No.
Kids being
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In fact, it keeps like the language in the ad suggests you're already great as you are, right? Now, I do think that this is indicative of certain tendencies or a certain way of looking at higher education. It's maybe not coming from the institutions themselves usually, but I think does come from certain segments of the population, right? And I think that a lot of people come to college with the assumption that, you come for 4 to 6 years and that you should be just kind of leaving with a certification, and all of your previous beliefs and opinions should be allowed to remain intact. And I think that that's kind of the wrong way to go about it, personally. I'm not suggesting that anybody should adopt any particular political program or you should be aping whatever your professors say, that sort of thing, right? But I think a big part of the point, and I think we'll get to some of this when we talk about Douglas, is learning to think for yourself and learning to navigate your own way through situations that don't have any clear right or wrong answer. And that if you come through college completely unchanged, right, thinking exactly what you did as you did when you got here, then you've probably not really got much out of it, right? And this is coupled with other kind of broad cultural assumptions about education. I'm going to show you a quick video, one that plagued my existence late at night in the mid-aughts. It was an ad for a company called Education Connection, and you're already weirdly grooving to that beat, even before I started playing the commercial. And you can actually tell a lot about the rhetorical aims of an ad based on when during the day it airs, right? So, for example, what kind of ads do you tend to see if you're watching TV during the day on a weekday?
Like appliances,
Mm-hmm.
paper towels.
Yeah, okay.
All I
Yeah.
can think about is paper towels.
Appliances. Yeah, appliances and cleaning products, right? You'll often see ads for toys and for amusement parks and Happy Meals and things like
And
that,
like
right?
restaurants.
Yeah, so I think some of that is because one of the audiences that's at home during the day is, parents with young children, right? You will also often see ads for things like collectible coins and, railings for your bathroom and reverse mortgages and, various, medications, right? Now, why is that? What other group of people is also typically home during the day?
Old people.
Yes, old people. Now, I used to see this commercial around 1 a.m. When I was up late watching old Simpsons reruns, right? So what sorts of people in around 2010 would have been at home, awake, at 1 a.m. watching Simpsons reruns? Teenagers or college students, right? I was actually a grad student. I was in my early 30s. But also, people who don't have jobs for which they have to get up early, right? So unemployed young men would have been in
I was gonna
particular.
say me, even though I was 8 years old, but I was still.
Yeah.
My dad was so funny. I used to call them the yellow people because I couldn't say
Yeah.
Simpsons. So Dad's like, you want to watch the yellow people? And I was like, yeah. It was so bad.
They also only have 4 fingers on each hand.
That shit is kind of weird. And they don't have hair.
Not really. Yeah. Well, some of them do.
Well, Lisa does.
But what I'd like us to do right with this commercial, it's only about a minute long, but the song will haunt you for years afterwards. What I want you to do is focus on what it assumes you think about college, right? What does it assume you think about college and about education?
I'm looking for an hourly wage. I went to high school, didn't do great. See if I gotta make more cash. Education is what I'm looking at. When I get a degree, I will make a bigger salary. So now I've got to see which college is right for me. I went on the internet and found Education Connection. I took some free tests to find out my direction. I'm taking my classes
now you see how much I care about your education because everything about this commercial enrages me. So, what are the assumptions in this commercial?
But if you don't go to college, you're not gonna have any money.
Okay, yeah, that right. People who don't go to college work what kinds of jobs?
Waitresses,
Yeah,
dropouts.
yeah. Yeah, in fact, they keep reminding you of the waitress job, right? You've got the ketchup and mustard container spinning on the record, right? It's like, don't go to college and this is what will happen, right? Like the worst thing you could possibly be in the world is a server or a barista, right?
Yeah.
So on the one hand, there is something about like the social standing that comes along with certain kinds of work, right? And assumptions that people have about certain kinds of work and the people who do them. But what else is like, what, if people who don't go to college have to work difficult low-wage jobs, then what does this seem to assume the primary purpose of going to college is?
So you get a lot of money.
Yeah. Purpose of college is to make more money.
Which shouldn't be the purpose at all.
And it is generally speaking true that people who have college degrees make higher salaries than people who don't. Although, this is also highly dependent on the kinds of professions people go into, right? Like, for example, I may have mentioned before, my father made more money as a union pipe fitter than I do as, an associate professor of English, right? So, I have more education than my father had, but he actually made a higher salary than I did. Although the work he did was also much more physically difficult. So yeah, the basic purpose of college is to make more money. And does it seem to think that anything about college should be hard? Does the commercial seem to think that anything about college should be hard?
Nope.
Yep. This should be, college should,
Relax.
yeah.
Doing it on time.
Yeah.
Doesn't talk about student loans,
Uh-huh.
debt.
In fact, what's the word that keeps popping up in big,
Free.
bold, bright? Free, yeah. The word free.
That's a lie. So
Well, it is and it isn't, right? On the one hand, the test you can take to find your connection, right, is free. But it's not free to enroll in any of the colleges that they connect you to, right? And what Education Connection was, I don't know if this company still exists, but they were basically a front for a bunch of online diploma mills, right? Which were just kind of like, taking people's money and handing out worthless degrees. But what they're doing is playing on this notion that's pretty pervasive in the public imagination, right? That the whole purpose of college, the whole purpose of education, is to get a better, easier job that pays you more money, right? And there are ways in which even our public institutions of higher learning sometimes play into this, right? So I'm sure you are all familiar with this.
just a little bit.
And what do we notice is the very first thing you see when you log onto our university website. Apply for free.
And
Yes.
then small print. What's that say?
Undergraduates only, must apply online. But yeah, we got apply for free right over the future students button, right? And then what do we see over the alumni button?
Hello, wall.
Yeah, a little road, right, leading off into this tree-lined avenue, right?
Where is that?
That's by the admin building. It's
Yeah.
called Hello Walk. Like whenever you walk, you're supposed to wave and say hello to people.
Yeah, but no,
Nobody
people
does
do.
that.
People don't. Yeah, I didn't even know that it was supposed to be that it was called Hello Walk, or that there was any tradition attached to it till last year. And I've worked here since 2012. I mean, like this is. So Hello Walk is clearly not really a thing. as much as Weaver might want it to be. But if you go out the front of this building and you make a left, no, you make a right, and then you make a left right before you get to the admin building. That's where this is, right? But yeah, the point I'm trying to make is this is actually a pretty rhetorically effective image, right? Because you apply for free over here, and then right above the alumni button this is your path, right? This is your road.
Yeah, I noticed it was set up like that.
Well, and I think it's kind of designed for you not to really notice that it's set up like that, right? I think there's this
Subliminal.
yeah, it's suggestive rather than explicit.
I feel like at the end of the year, I'm just going to overanalyze everything.
Well, better to overanalyze things than to underanalyze things.
Average class size 20.
Yeah. Well, so yeah, but this is more the kind of information you usually expect to see
Right.
in a university advertisement, right? And yeah, some of this is number fudging a little bit, right? So, for example, like average class, like averages are always deceptive,
Right.
right? If you live in a country where most people, subsist on, say, $15,000 a year, but a few people have like, 20 billion a year, then that average skews the actual conditions, right? So like, at a university like this, you might have 60 people in your intro to sociology class, right? And 3 people in your English class. But, when you then average that out, that comes out to about 30, right? So, but the idea here, like, what do they want you? Why do they give you the average class size and student-teacher ratio here? What are they trying to emphasize?
That we have small class size,
Mhm.
it's not like a giant room of 60 plus people.
Yep, small class sizes, and given how many students there are to instructors, you will likely get more personal attention, right? Now, do these pictures look a little more traditional than what we saw in the Centennial College ad?
Oh, yeah. It's exactly what we said it would be.
Yeah. On the one, we have one student smiling, looking at the camera, holding a book, right?
That's a big old textbook too.
Yep. We have students working in a science lab here, right?
And it's
Then
very
nursing.
diverse.
And then we have, nursing. I actually know that guy. We have nursing students here, taking a dummy's vitals, right? But yes, so this is all kind of emphasizing classroom and campus experience stuff, right? And then we scroll down to these cane spotlights, and these are kind of a mixed bag, right? We've got a picture of a student. Traditionally, usually what we have is a picture is a photogenic female student, and then a brief statement from the student about why they chose the school, right? And Ayana here has chosen a statement that's sort of like based more on fit and feelings, right? That it felt good. Now, if we reload the page, then this would come up with a different student, and other students, sometimes mention, particular academic programs that they were looking for, things like that, right? But yeah, so we get kind of a variety with these. But all the sorts of stuff you expect to find in a traditional university brochure. But then everything does kind of, come back to this logic of, make it easy, right? For a little while, there were also, there are these pop-up ads that you would get every time you logged onto the website, right? Or every time you went to the website, click here to apply.
Oh yeah, and then I take
Uh-huh.
me straight to Georgia Futures, and I'm like, I'm not going there. I'm
Uh-huh.
already in the school.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get on Georgia.
Mhm.
That's
But-
what irritated me.
Yeah, the basic point I'm trying to make here, though, right, is that the way we think about and the way we sell education tends to be very market-oriented and based on ease and convenience, right? Now, when we compare this to Frederick Douglass's experience of education and what Douglass believes education should do, right? Now, Douglass's education in literacy really does have a practical effect for him, right?
Didn't he teach people how to read?
Sure. Yeah, he absolutely. He published for many years an abolitionist newspaper. So his whole sort of future profession, like not just his personal identity as free person, but his professional identity is based on the printed word. But for Douglass, reading and writing also have very particular practical applications, right? What does learning how to read do for him?
It educates him. I mean, after he learned, he was talking about how he learned
Mm-hmm.
what abolitionists mean and like what abolition, that people were
Yeah.
trying to abolish slavery, and he learned that from that,
Okay, yeah, he gets an awareness,
of what's going on.
yeah, of current events in his social context, right? Because he learns how to read. And what very practical thing is he able to do once he learns how to write?
I feel like this should be an easy answer.
What's that?
So I feel like this should be an easy answer.
It is, actually. There is one very specific thing he wants to be able to do. Which is considerably less simple, right? I mean, that I think is the big overarching goal, right? But in terms of personal goals in the immediate future, that learning to write allowed him to meet.
Tell a story.
Although he's now telling the story many years
After
later,
the
right?
fact.
Yeah, after the odds of him like getting caught and returned to that family in Baltimore are basically nil, right? After he meets with those Irishmen in the shipyard on page 26, right? I was too young to think of doing so immediately. Besides, I wish to learn how to write, as I might have occasion to write my own pass. So what he wants to do is forge a pass that he can use to get to a free state, right? Now, does anybody know why he would have to forge a pass to do that? Like, why couldn't he just cross the border from Maryland to Pennsylvania and stay there and no one would bother him?
They were like slave catchers, like off their, like
Yeah.
looking for, like specifically looking for runaways.
Exactly. And the fact,
Oh, the Irishman were.
yeah, he's suspicious that the Irishmen might be, might themselves be trying to convince him to run away so they can catch him and bring him back and get the reward, right? So I think one of the things he's pointing out there is part of the nastiness of this system is that it makes people so suspicious of each other, right? That even people who seem like they want to help him, right, he's not sure he can trust them. But also, yeah, this does also point out, the reason he needs a pass, or he needs to forge emancipation papers that show that prove that he's free, because even in so-called free states, escaped slaves would be returned to the people who owned them if they were caught, right?
Well, yeah, I thought he was free.
Well, he works that out for himself, right? Yeah, the family the family that owns him does not let him go, right? He does escape, and it's through reading and writing that he first gets the idea and then is able to put the plan into action, right? So there's a direct literal connection here between literacy and freedom, right? Right, we are meant to think of these two things as working hand in hand with each other. So, to kind of dig a little further into this, can I get somebody to read the paragraph for us on page 24 that starts with, "I was now about 12 years old, and the thought of being a slave for life."
I was now about 12 years old, and the thought of being a slave for life began to bear heavily upon my heart. Just about this time, I got hold of a book entitled The Columbian Orator. Every opportunity I got, I used to read this book. Among much of other interesting matter, I found in it a dialogue between a master and his slave. The slave was represented as having run away from his master 3 times. The dialogue represented the conversation which took place between them. When the slave was retaken the 3rd time, in this dialogue, the whole argument in behalf of the slavery was brought forward by the master, all of which was disposed of by the slave. The slave was made to say some very smart as well as impressive things in reply to his master, things which had the desired though unexpected effect, for the conversation resulted in the voluntary emancipation of the slave on the part of the master.
Okay, thank you. So what's important for him about reading this master-slave dialogue? What does he get from this?
To me, it seemed like he saw the slave in a different light, I guess, than what they're used to. They weren't educated, but then this one was, as he said, was saying very smart as well, impressive things. Yeah,
the slave in this dialogue is intelligent, right? So here's someone who is in the same condition, the same state he is, right? Who is clever. And in fact, how clever is this slave?
Clever enough to be free.
Yeah. He actually convinces the master to emancipate him, right? Simply through the use of words, right?
Yes.
So what's the lesson here about for Douglas?
He needs to be smart.
And indeed, he can be, right?
Yeah, he can be smart and then, intelligent like him and figure out a way to get himself emancipated. So he's not a slave for life.
Yeah. And what's the way to do it?
Escape.
Eventually. Well, he comes to that conclusion later, right? But what is this again, think about how the slave gains his freedom, right?
Reading and writing.
Yeah. Language, right? The slave is emancipated through the intelligent use of language. So this is also a lesson in the power of language, right, to change people's minds. Now, bless you.
Thank you.
If we think back to previous texts on rhetoric that we've read, right? Do we remember what Plato's attitude towards rhetoric was? If we think back to the dialogue, the Gorgias. It was a while ago, yeah. We may have to dig deep. So this is the one in which Socrates is having the argument with the rhetorician Gorgias, right?
Yeah. Didn't he think it was not useful? Was it him that thought it was not useful?
Yeah, and not just not useful, but actively harmful, right? So Gorgias speaks in his parts about how powerful rhetoric is because it creates belief, right? And Plato's problem with rhetoric is that it creates belief without truth. So for Plato, rhetoric is an inferior counterfeit of philosophy, right? It's a dangerous counterfeit
So like a false hope.
of philosophy. Yeah, or I mean, more sort of like less about false hope, maybe, and more about just planting false ideas in people's heads, right? The ideas rhetoricians plant don't have to be false. Even Plato would acknowledge that. But because they don't have to be true either, he considers that problematic, right? That rhetoric is only concerned with creating belief, not about finding truth. Now, what about Plato's student Aristotle? Do we remember what Aristotle's attitude towards rhetoric was?
Wasn't it the opposite of what he believed in?
Pretty close to the opposite. Yeah, he does not believe what his teacher believed, right?
Right.
So for Aristotle, rhetoric is a morally neutral tool, right?
Yeah, like, I think Plato was like more so against it, and Aristotle was like, I guess he surpassed his teacher and found that rhetoric isn't as, I guess, unuseful as anything.
Yeah. And if people are going to use it anyway,
Yeah.
then you need to understand it. You need to be able to break it down into parts and figure out how it works, right? And that's like Aristotle's big thing, period, is breaking things down into parts and trying to figure out how they work. The other thing that Aristotle argues, right, is that true and just arguments tend naturally to win out over false or unjust arguments, right? That we have a natural predisposition towards truth and justice that rhetoric can help to awaken, right? So, which of these thinkers do you think Douglas would be closer to?
Aristotle.
100% Aristotle, right? Because he is seeing not only that rhetoric is useful, right, but that the truth and justice of the slave's arguments win out over the slave master's arguments, right? They both are able to muster enough information to make their case, right? But the slave's arguments are so good and so just that the slave master relents and lets him go. So yeah, this is very much an argument about the power of language to effect change. Now, would Douglas's master and mistress agree about the power of language to affect things in the real world?
Maybe not so much for Douglas. And I mean, the mission was kind of iffy because, like, reading like that first page and how he was like talking about her a lot.
Yeah.
At first, she was tenderhearted, and I guess gave me his first glimpse of what reading and writing, what reading was. And then
Yeah.
she like turned, I guess, for me and her husband.
Yeah, what is her
Yeah.
deal? Can we talk about her?
Absolutely. That's what I was hoping we were about to do.
Is that
I was like, just,
if it's his mistress, is that like his little side piece or is that like his wife?
No. So Douglas's mistress is the wife of his master, right?
Oh, okay.
That was just insane.
Yeah. Mistress is the feminine form of the word master.
Oh, okay. That's what I was looking like.
Mhm.
What's he got going on over there?
But yeah, so if we're looking at Douglas's relationship here with the mistress, right? Yeah, what do we note, or what does he note as the impetus for the change in her? Why does she change her attitude towards him?
because she's trying to follow after her husband?
Yeah.
It says down there.
Yep. My mistress, who had kindly commenced to instruct me, had, in compliance with the advice and direction of her husband, not only ceased to instruct, but had set her face against my being instructed by anyone else. So she's told by her husband to stop instructing the boy, right? Now, we can probably compare this to that part at the end of Audre Lorde's essay, right? Where she is talking to other female academics, right? And asking them why they don't teach texts by black women authors, by Latina authors, by lesbian authors, right? And one of the
qualified.
yeah, or one of the responses, like, what would my husband or my male supervisor think, right? So it's important that he notes that she does this at the direction of her husband, right? To show that she is also in some ways a subordinate, right? She doesn't do this of her own volition. She does this because she is also in the grip of a system that places white men above everyone else. Even if she does end up embracing the system just as enthusiastically, right?
So even though she doesn't really want to stop teaching him or hurt him, she has to because she has to do what her husband tells her to do.
Yeah, and then she seems to adopt it as her own idea, right? And to treat him just as cruelly as anyone else, right? If we look at the bottom of the first paragraph, page 23, right? It is due, however, to my mistress to say of her that she did not adopt this course of treatment immediately. She at first lacked the depravity indispensable to shutting me up in mental darkness. It was at least necessary for her to have some training in the exercise of irresponsible power to make her equal to the task of treating me as though I were a brute. So are there any particular words or phrases that jump out at you here?
Mental darkness.
Okay, yeah. Let's talk about that for a second. The idea of shutting someone up in mental darkness. What is mental darkness in this case?
Not allowing him to learn, like reading and writing.
Yeah.
To remain uneducated.
Yeah, mental darkness is ignorance and illiteracy, right? And what is shutting someone up in mental darkness? Like, what does this sound like? What is this comparing ignorance and illiteracy to?
Like slavery, to be like locking someone up.
Uh-huh.
shutting you up. I would think, that would be like silencing someone.
Yeah.
But also like, I think of like shutting, I don't know, like a jail door.
Shutting the door of the cage. Yeah, exactly. This is a prison metaphor. Yes. So yeah, ignorance and illiteracy are like a prison, right? And he's saying that at first, his mistress lacked the depravity to shut him up in mental darkness. Does everybody know what depravity means?
I don't.
Well, to deprive someone of something is to make sure that they don't get it, right? Is to withhold something from someone. Depravity is something a little bit different. Depravity is a lack of moral sense. So, for example, like if someone is charged with murder through depraved indifference, right? This is someone who didn't actually actively do something to kill another person, but lacked the obvious moral sense to step in and stop whatever would have happened to cause this person's death, right? Yeah, so someone who is depraved has no moral sense, right?
So can you restate that sentence?
Sure.
That? Now I don't have to restate it.
Yeah. She at first lacked the depravity indispensable to shutting me up in mental darkness. It was at least necessary for her to have some training in the exercise of irresponsible power to make her equal to the task of treating me as though I were a brute.
What does brute mean?
Okay, can anybody answer that?
A brute is like I just think of a big dummy, like a big, powerful dummy. Like, have you ever read of Mice and Men? The book about, I think of
Lenny.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I know you're talking about
He would
that.
be a brute, I would think.
And like this is what we typically mean by brute today, right? But it had a slightly different meaning in 1843. So a brute,
Or a savage or something.
well, a brute doesn't even refer to a human in this period, right? A brute refers to a non-sentient animal. Right? Basically an animal that has no reason, right? No capacity to reason. So the fact that he's arguing that by treating him like he has no capacity to reason, his masters behave as though they have no capacity for morality or conscience, right? Hence the use of the specific terms depravity and brute here. Now to go on here with what he says about his mistress, right? Can somebody continue reading here? My mistress was, as I have said, a kind and tender-hearted woman.
I can read it.
Go for it.
My mistress was, as I said, a kind, tender-hearted woman. In the simplicity of her soul, she commenced when I first went to live with her to treat me as she shocked one human being out to treat another. In entering upon the duties of a slave holder, she did not seem to perceive that I sustained to her the relations of a mere chattel.
Chattel. Yep. Pause there for a second. You guys know what chattel means?
Like,
Okay, chattel means livestock. Basically, animals that are property. Okay, keep going.
and that for her to treat me as a human being was not only wrong but dangerous. So slavery proved that injurious to her as it did to me. I went there. She was a
Pious.
pious, warm, and tender-hearted woman. There were no sorrows or suffering for which she had not a tear. She had bread for the hungry, clothes for the naked, and comfort for every mourner that came within her reach. Slavery should soon prove its ability to divest her of these heavenly qualities. Under its influence, the tender heart became stern, and the lamb-like disposition gave way to one of tiger-like fierceness.
Mm-hmm.
The first step in her downward course was in her increasing to instruct me. She was commenced to practice her husband's precepts. She finally became even more violent in her opposition than her husband himself. She was not satisfied with simply doing as well as he commanded. She seemed anxious to do better. Nothing seemed to make her more angry than to see me with the newspaper. She seemed to think that here lay the danger. I have her
Mm-hmm.
I have her manner that fully revealed her apprehension. She was an
Apt.
apt
Mm-hmm.
woman, and a little experience soon demonstrated to her satisfaction that education and slavery were incompatible with each other.
Okay, so on what point would Douglas and his mistress agree with each other?
That slavery and education didn't go together.
Yeah, they would both agree about that, right? But from different angles, right? Now, why do education and slavery not work together, right? Why do these things not go together?
Because education is like freedom and slavery
Uh-huh.
is the opposite of.
Yeah. Why is she so angry every time she sees him specifically with a newspaper?
Because he's getting news, like news. He's being consciously aware of what is going on.
Yeah.
And she might not want him to know specifically what's going on because during that time.
Yeah, less.
Starting to try and change what was going on.
Yeah.
Having the knowledge of that could have been
Exactly.
dangerous.
A newspaper gives him information about current events, right? And a slave is by definition not a citizen.
Right.
And to give people who are non-citizens, who are legally non-people, right, information about current events, let them know too much about what's going on, right? And they might get it in their heads that they want to change their condition in some way, or they want to change their state in some way, right? And Douglas would fully agree, right? Except that on the master-mistress side of this equation, they want to maintain the status quo, right? And he wants to see slaves be educated so they will no longer want to be slaves. So they will desire freedom, right? I don't want to say will no longer want to be slaves. Maybe more will no longer tolerate being slaves, I think is a better way to frame that, right? What's that? Yeah. And I think this is a good place to introduce a concept. We'll kind of tease this out a little bit further in a minute. I know I'm going to spell this guy's name wrong, because I always do. But there's a French anthropologist by the name of Claude Massu. And stop me if I've mentioned him before. I end up mentioning his work a lot in various contexts, just because it intersects with a lot of the stuff that I work on. So Massu argues that there are really kind of two ways to think about a slave's status in a slave society, right? The first he calls condition. And the condition of slavery has to do with the material living conditions. That a slave is given, right? Are they fed enough? Are they given, decent clothes to wear, a decent place to live, right? Are they humanely treated? Are they beaten or not, right? And the second way of thinking about slavery, Massu calls state. And the state of slavery is the slave's legal status as property. And Massu argues that we tend to confuse these two things, right? That we often excuse past slaveholding societies for their behavior if they kept their slaves in decent conditions, and then tend to override the fact that they own, just to overlook the fact that they owned other people and thought it was okay to do that, right? What Massu is saying is that what's really more important here is that state of slavery, right? The slave's legal status as an object, as property, right? And we see this kind of threaded through these first two paragraphs as Douglas talks about being treated like a chattel or like a brute, right? As opposed to being treated like a human being. Now we can see some of this also in the paragraph in which he talks about basically tricking the little white boys in the neighborhood into teaching him to read, right? How is he able to do this? How does he convince them to help him with his reading?
He makes them channels their competitive side.
Okay, well that's how he learns how to write, right?
Oh, shoot. Wrong
Yeah,
one.
he learns those letters from looking at the shipboard, the lumber in the shipyard, right? And then, learns what sounds they stand for. Okay, great. And then, he goes and tricks those boys into competition with him, right? But on page 24...
He converted them into teachers, but did he teach them, or were he just made them his teachers? Like, if he saw them, he would make friends with them so they could teach him.
Yeah, he makes friends with them to get them to teach him things, right? And what does he do to make friends with them? What does he always have?
A book. He's always took his book.
He's always got his book because he's always waiting for a lesson,
And
right?
bread.
And bread, yeah. Because his material conditions are actually better than theirs, right? Even though he doesn't actually own the bread in the house, he has access to as much as he wants, right? He's not starved, he's not beaten, he's not, made to live in a tool closet underneath a public building, right? That sort of thing, sitting in his own excrement, that kind of thing, right? So his material conditions for a slave are actually quite good, and he notes himself are better than those of some of his white neighbors, right? But what's really important in this paragraph is what he notes near the end here, right? I used to talk over this matter of slavery with them. I would sometimes say to them, I wished I could be as free as they would be when they got to be men. You will be as free as soon as you are 21, but I am a slave for life. Have not I as good a right to be free as you have? These words used to trouble them. They would express for me the liveliest sympathy and console me with the hope that something would occur by which I might be free. So even though he knows that he's living more comfortably than these other people around him, right? He's still, the thing that weighs on him is still the fact that their state is superior legally to his, right? That they're all human beings, but they are not equal under law. It doesn't matter how much bread he has, right?
Yeah.
What matters is that he has he's not free and has no hope of getting free. Right? The phrase slave for life recurs a number of times here. And it's a reminder that emancipation on the part of the slave owner was really rare, right? This was not something that happened very often. So, where do I want to take this now? There's one more thing that I wanted to talk about, and it is escaping my brain at the moment. Can I get somebody to read last paragraph on page 25 for us?
I will.
Thank you.
I often found myself regretting my own existence, and I'm wishing myself dead, and but for the hope of being free, I have no doubt but that I should have killed myself, or done something for which I should have been killed. While in this state of mind, I was eager to hear anyone speak of slavery. I was a ready listener. Every little while, I could hear something about that abolitionist. It was some time before I found what the word meant. It was also used in such connections as to make it an interesting word to me. If a slave ran away and succeeded in getting clear, or if a slave killed his master, set fire to a barn, or did anything very wrong in the mind of a slaveholder, it was spoken of as the fruit of abolition. Hearing the word in this connection very often, I set about learning what it meant. The dictionary afforded me little or no help. I found it was the act of abolishing.
The act of abolishing.
Abolishing. But then I did not know what was to be abolished. Here I was perplexed. I did not dare to ask anyone about its meaning, for I was satisfied that it was something they wanted me to know very little about. After a patient waiting, I got one of our city papers containing an account of the number of petitions from the North, praying for the abolition of slavery in the District of Columbia and of the slave trade between the states. From this time I understood the words abolitionist, and always drew near when that word was spoken, expected to hear something of importance to myself and fellow slaves. The light broke in upon me by degrees.
Okay, we can stop there. I think
Okay.
that's the part I wanted to focus on here, right?
Okay.
So one thing that I want us to think about here for a second is how Douglas's process of education has differed from yours. How has your education proceeded by and large?
Just like,
Uh-huh.
Kind of just climbing the stairs.
same process that
Yeah.
everyone goes through, just
Yeah, I like that analogy, like climbing a staircase. Yeah, it's like you start on the kindergarten step, right, and then you go to the first grade step and second and third and so on, right, and you just kind of keep moving. Yeah, and you keep moving through a system that goes in a straight line, right? You know, generally, one of the first important things we learn is how to read, right, and then shortly thereafter we learn how to write.
And it's not until college that you're getting a different education from what other people are getting. Like, everyone is getting like the same exact thing, or like
Right.
at least like the basis of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, or at least everybody in your particular
Right.
local system
Learning
who's
the same
who's
thing.
tracked a particular way, right? Yeah. So
Same curriculum and all, but then it changes when you pick your majors and what you want to do for the rest of your life.
yeah. I mean, you get more individual selection of what you want to do when you're in college, right?
Right.
And
But-
you have the option to change it too.
Yeah. And
He
what?
made his own education happen.
Yeah, and that's the other thing that I wanted to get to, right? Is that you have had teachers throughout your process, right? There's a person in the front of the room who's supposed to be giving you information, and whom you're supposed to ideally be able to come to with questions, right? Maybe that's easier with some teachers than with others.
Right.
But he has no such plan, right? And no such specific individual he can go to for information. So when he wants something as simple as the definition of a word, what does he have to do?
He's gotta learn.
You have to like keep listening in on conversations and
Yeah.
use like context clues basically. Just to
Exactly.
learn the definition of a word.
Yeah, he has to use context clues to figure it out, right?
So that's not something he can ask.
Yeah.
Hey, what's this mean?
Yeah. Hey, I keep hearing you guys talk about abolition. What's that, right? Yeah. Which, one, then they know he was eavesdropping, right?
Yeah.
And two, this is something that he
Should
is,
not know.
that he one thing that you can gather from context immediately is it's something they don't want him to know about.
Right.
Yeah. So even something as simple as learning a vocabulary word requires a more difficult process, right? In part because the official definition doesn't help. It doesn't tell him what he wants to know.
Oh yeah, that.
Yeah, I mean, like that's
The act of abolishing.
Yeah, I mean,
Was that what it was? I think so.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and I mean that's a fairly common experience, right? How often have you gone to look a word up
Oh my God.
and found the
So
definition completely unhelpful?
Like, why is it even in here?
Yeah.
Where's the
That's
space?
sometimes with the older English, and you have to go to the word like they want, but then it's like the word that they use now, and it's completely different, and you're like,
Yeah.
is this right?
Yeah, or like an instance like we just had sort of here with Brute, right? So I don't know if our library still has access to it. We used to, but I think they stopped paying for it. But the Oxford English Dictionary actually will tell you not just what the current definition of a word is, but also its historical derivation, right? So what it meant in the past and where it comes from, right? So, for example, when we talked about different words for body functions earlier in the semester, right? We know, for example, the word, shit has come virtually untransformed from Anglo-Saxon into modern English and still means the same thing it used to, right? But then, we have words like a word like villain. Its antecedent is a French word, villain, which just means an inhabitant of a village. But through a process of linguistic transformations, it comes into modern English. It comes to and the OED traces these changes over time in the use of words. So it is actually a really useful resource. If you can get access to it, it's really helpful.
Like the word chattel, it sounds like cattle, and it means livestock.
And it means something very similar. Yeah. Now, chattel is used in a slightly different context than livestock or cattle. Chattel is a word that's usually used in a context of like economics and exchange, right? So chattel is something that you can buy and it's property you buy and sell, but it is usually living property that you buy and sell. Was there another point that I was trying to make? I don't think so. we wandered off on a slight tangent here. Yeah. I think that's basically what I wanted to get through today. Do you guys have any questions about anything or anything you want to say?
I think somebody said it, but like Frederick was like kind of in charge of his own education, whereas we always had like a set plan, even though we didn't have no. We were able to choose our classes when we got older, like in maybe like high school or so.
Yeah.
But like it was always been like set out what we're going to
Sure.
do, whereas he had to actually go.
And even now, you have a faculty advisor to help you, right?
Right.
And you still have particular boxes you need to tick off, and yeah. This was the other thing that I wanted to get to. Right? This is actually, I think, another place where this is in dialogue with Audre Lorde, right? That Lorde talked about the importance of having a community to support you when you use your voice, right?
Right.
And Douglas is kind of literally taught by a community how to use his voice, right? How to express himself in language. All right, so that'll do it for today. You are free to go. Have yourselves a good weekend.